I'm going to be looking at working women, and I'm focusing in particular on the Victorian era and the changes that happened for women during this time. Let women be what God intended, a helpmate for man, but with totally different duties and vocations. It is noted that this quote from Queen Victoria fueled feminists. Many critics have said during this time, powerful men used this quote to undermine women and their role in society. Queen Victoria herself was completely against women's rights and their right to work or to own their own property. However, she did recognise that men and women were different, and she said that women should not be equal to men because if they were, then there would be no women left. Barbara Bodekin Smith calls the Queen herself a working woman. Our gracious Queen fulfills the very arduous duties of her calling and manages also to be the active mother of many children. She believed that the woman's place was at home, cooking, cleaning and looking after the children. Women controlled the domestic and private sphere, whereas men worked and ruled the public sphere. An unmarried woman could inherit money and property after she reached the age of 21, but once married, all control would revert to her husband. A woman could not have a will for her own personal possessions, since the control was in her husband's power. He could distribute her property in any way he likes, even to his illegitimate children, if he has any. During the Victorian era, this law existed, whereby if women did work, all their wages and property belonged to their husband. He could do with them what he wished. Not only did he own all her possessions, but he also had complete ownership of his wife's body. However, during the Victorian era, things did change. In 1839, 2 years into Queen Victoria's reign, a law was passed which stated that if parents did separate, children under 7 should stay with their mother. In 1857, 20 years into Queen Victoria's reign, women were able to divorce their husbands if they were abusive. In 1870, women were eventually allowed to keep their wages that they had earned. And in 1891, women could not be forced to live with their husbands. So, although it took a very long time for the independent working woman, things were slowly beginning to change. This table here, which was comprised during Queen Victoria's penultimate year of reign, shows working women in 1900 and the professions they undertook. Many women worked as domestic servants, either maids, nannies or waitresses. Although they were doing the same things that they would have been previously doing at home, women were now earning a wage and were even allowed to keep it. It also shows us that women worked in professions where they were able to help other people, teachers, nurses and few were doctors, and that not many women were currently in the creative arts sector. Dinah Mallock-Craig, in her piece A Woman's Thoughts About Women, says that the arts is the most difficult sector for a woman to work in. She states, "I put art first as being the most difficult, perhaps in its highest form, almost impossible to women." Here, I have also focused on one individual who for me was an important figure during the Victorian era concerning the rights of working women. Elizabeth Garrett Anderson was born in East London. She had 11 brothers and sisters. Her father was a hard-working businessman, so he paid for all his children to have a decent education. Barbara Bodekin Smith argues in her piece, Women and Work, that it is the responsibility of the parents to educate their daughters and teach them skills which they can live off of in later life. She says concerning women's well-being, they rarely have this training. It is the duty of the fathers and mothers to give their daughters this training. The norm of the era was for Garrett to complete her education, and then she would find a man to marry. However, throughout her time in education, she had acquainted herself with Emily Davies, who was a feminist, and Elizabeth Blackwell, who was the first American woman physician. These meetings inspired Garrett to further her education and become a doctor. She began to attend classes for nursing, which were originally intended for males, and she was eventually barred after the students complained. In 1865, she passed exams from the Society of Apothecaries and eventually gained her certificate to become a doctor. In this year, she also joined the Kensington Society, which was a discussion group for feminists, which later became the National Union of Women's Suffrage Society, which combined the Kensington Society with 19 other similar feminist groups. The Society of Apothecaries had no laws against women training as doctors, and because of Garrett, they changed their laws so women were not allowed to study in this way. In 1870, the Kensington Society sent a bill to Parliament in order to get the women's vote. This was denied. In this year, Garrett also met her future husband, James Anderson, whom she married in 1871 and became Elizabeth Garrett Anderson. She attended the University of Paris and gained her medical degree. However, the British Medical Register refused to accept this as a qualification. Her medical career was difficult as men refused to visit a woman doctor. She struggled in this field for a long time. However, in 1872, she founded a hospital purely for women. Here she worked with Elizabeth Blackwell and Garrett Anderson and earned the title of becoming Britain's first woman doctor. Because of Garrett Anderson, in 1876, a law was passed allowing women to enter into the medical profession. Anderson later died in 1917. Her daughter, Louisa Garrett Anderson, went on to be a political feminist. Elizabeth Garrett Anderson's successful education and, although tough, but impressive medical career allowed women to progress into the field, and she herself helped the rights of working women during the Victorian time.
Was there a core text that you were referring to?
Yeah, that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what text was it in there?
I've got those afterwards. The Barbara Bodekin one, which is called Women in Work, I think.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, that one. And then that Dinah Mullock-Craig, A Woman's Thoughts About Women.
Okay.
So what are you actually arguing in terms of this progression? Why did things change? I mean, what do you think is the? I mean, you made a very kind of plausible case that as the decades go on, there's more and more enlightened legislation. But who's driving that? Do you think there's a kind of?
I think it's kind of like individually, women kind of realise that they could do as much as men could do,
Right.
and maybe with Queen in reign, like I talked about, maybe like they thought, well, if she can do it and if she can kind of rule a country, then why can't I, like, get into business? Like, why should it just have to be the man that brings in the money? Why can't the woman do it as well?
Do you kind of think about what did Queen Victoria think she was then?
Well, I don't know. Like all the things I read, she was really against like the rights of women and stuff, which is strange because if
She's
she
the
was
most powerful person in the
and
land,
if she was completely against them, then she wouldn't have been in her position either. But I don't know. Maybe she kind of changed her views over time. I don't know. But yeah, it seems really like hypocritical to say.
It's odd, doesn't it?
Yeah, to say to women, no, you can't do that, but I'll do this.
Because people say that about Mrs. Thatcher as well, that she was this kind of person who.
But she said, doesn't she, that she was like the mother of her country, and then she ruled her home or something. And then people were saying that because she was a woman, that maybe it should have been the other way around, that she should have ruled her country and should have mothered at home.
Any thoughts on how what you discussed relates to some of the literary texts you've looked at? Are there any particular texts or episodes that intersect with what you've been discussing?
With Lucy in Villette, you could maybe talk about that because she wanted to be a teacher and that she would never be able to do that if she did like earlier marry, then everything that she would have kind of earned would have gone to him. And the fact that she went on to have a career and then she met, well, eventually she kind of met the guy. Because I think one of them was saying in the What is a Woman to Do book, but I can't remember which it was, saying to like have a career first and then get married because that's what you're able to do, which is what kind of Garrett Anderson kind of did. She thought she had the career and she had the good education and then she got married. So she was able to do both instead of just get married.
And would the work of being a female author, what would you say about that?
Well, I guess you could put it in like as an artist to be creative, and it was quite difficult because like the Brontes, they wrote under pseudonyms and stuff because people didn't really agree with like women writing even now. Like with J.K. Rowling, they made her J.K. instead of Joanna because people didn't want her to know that she was a woman. Why, I don't know, but a lot of people just think that if it's like a man's point of view, or even if there's no sex to the author, then it's slightly easier to read.
This is probably a theoretical question, but this hospital, the Elizabeth Garrett Anderson Hospital, which was opened in the 1870s, did you say?
Yeah.
What was it called?
It was originally called like the Hospital for Women or
Hospital
something.
for Women.
And then, or something like that. And then when she died, they changed the name to like the Elizabeth Garrett Anderson Hospital.
Right, because it did
And
seem
it
a bit
was-
kind of egomaniacal if she just called it.
No, originally it was just like it was specifically for women, and then when she died, they changed the name. It was something. First off, it started as like gynecology and things like that, and then it changed. So now it's like a normal hospital. Just
It's called that now.
Yes.
And what is it? What kind of hospital is it now?
I think it's just for women, but like obviously. They
So it's
do
still
everything.
a women's
I think so. Yeah.
health issue.
Mhm.
Right. Okay. Whereabouts is it? Excuse my ignorance. Somewhere in London, I take it.
I would assume so. So I
Yeah.
did look that up. Should really know that, shouldn't I?
Well, actually, no, I think so, but I don't.
No. Yeah. Right.
It looked like London.
Yeah,
It was
certainly
because,
did,
she
It
said
like
that,
North London.
Yeah, it was a lot of people apparently refused to see a woman doctor. So women with like women problems would have to go to a man, and that's obviously a lot of women don't like to do that. So she set up this hospital purely for women, so that women could come to. Which in a way I guess is slightly ironic because she struggled because men refused to come to her. So maybe she should have probably broadened out her ducks and gone for like men's things instead, but instead she just set one up just for women.
It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, playing the profession of midwife with the, you know, with the kind of gender-specific title in it was almost invariably a female profession in the 18th and 19th century. So much to the point where when you get men practicing as midwives, they're called a man midwife or
Yeah.
men midwives. But to be a doctor is something else again, isn't it?
Yeah.
You need to kind of realise the kind of cultural importance of that.
Yeah, and that when she originally studied to be, I think it was just a nurse she originally studied to be, her class was full of men, and they kind of refused her and she got shunned out of it. Because like they didn't want a woman kind of studying, when it said when they did the anatomy and stuff, they felt uncomfortable that a woman was there and that women shouldn't be learning things like that.
Interesting. Okay. No further questions for Rob. Thank you. Thank you.
Right, so,